Good morning, students. We decided, Cynthia and I, that it would be helpful as you read The Faith of a People to have a little bit of the context and the background of what you're reading. So that's the purpose of this video. So I want to say that there are two different key aspects to this context and background. One of them is the Civil War in El Salvador, and the other one is the Base Christian Community Movement. So the Civil War in El Salvador was essentially a land reform struggle that the same 14 families when the war started had owned or controlled about 92% of the arable land since the conquest. So there was essentially a feudal society in the rural areas, which caused malnutrition in children because the landowners would charge whatever fees they wanted to charge for the use of the land. And often the fees were so high that people couldn't take care of their families. So, and when multinational companies came in to partner with the 14 families, that did not relieve the situation, it actually exacerbated it. So you need to understand the context in terms of the land reform struggle. In 1979, there was a coup by a military junta, and that's when the revolution started by the FMLN, which was a leftist coalition, very broad leftist coalition. So there was the violence started in 1979, and the war did not end until 1992. The population of El Salvador in 1980 was a little under 5 million. So just so you get a sense of how small the country actually is. There, according to the United Nations reports, there were roughly 75,000 people killed. There were 1 million people displaced, internal or external refugees, and countless disappeared. They couldn't figure out how many people had been disappeared, but they knew that it was a significant amount. Those that disappeared means that you were there one day, you were gone the next, and no one knew where you had gone. Or right. So United Nations reports and also reports by Amnesty International reported the targeting of civilians. So these disappearances were not obviously accidental. They were disappearances carried out by the army and the death squads, 95% and 5% by guerrilla forces. There were several prominent examples of the targeting specifically of the Catholic Church, or the Catholic Church that was engaged in supporting land reform. Many people have heard of the murder of Archbishop, excuse me, I wrote this wrong, Oscar Romero. I wrote Archbishop El Salvador, I meant Archbishop Oscar Romero in 1980, and of the prominent Jesuit professors in 1989. Most people don't know that our Lutheran bishop in El Salvador, Medardo Gomez, that had the same death squads that killed the prominent Jesuit professors, actually went to the Lutheran church, the main Lutheran cathedral in San Salvador, looking for Bishop Medardo Gomez because he had also taken a very strong stance for land reform, as the Lutheran church at the time was really the church of the poorest of the poor in El Salvador. But he was out of the country at the time, and he returned afterwards and didn't leave. So that just gives you a little bit of an insight into it. The war ended when U.S. funding for the war, the U.S. had been funding the government of El Salvador, and that war ended when the U.S. funding stopped. The Bush administration stopped the funding. So the Base Christian Community Movement, the Faith of a People, is a story of a particular set of Base Christian communities in a particular rural area of El Salvador, from 1970 to 1980. So remember, Archbishop Oscar Romero was killed in 1980. So this is what was happening, sort of the lead up to the time when he died and the oppression went to another level. In the Base Christian Community Movement started through the Second Vatican Council, Vatican II, which went on from 1962 to 1965 and was followed up by the Latin American Bishops' Conference at Medellin, Mexico in 1968, where, as one bishop said to me, the church switched sides, that the church had historically supported the 14 families, and then large portions of the church began to support the land reform movement. Coming out of the the Second Vatican Council, there was also a very strong support for the role of the laity, including the availability of the Bible, putting the Bible in the hands of the people, and a deeper commitment to social justice and to the poor. So the phrase that was often used was the preferential option for the poor, that we have to prioritize the needs and the perspectives of the poor for justice to occur for everyone. The Base Christian communities actually started as a movement before 1962. We have evidence of their existence in Latin America in the 1950s and the early 1960s. But the Second Vatican Council and the subsequent meeting of the bishops at Medellin really launched the Base Christian Community movement formally. They were a movement for holistic mission. They were small group Bible studies and prayer communities, which were seen as cells of evangelization and development, incarnating the document that had come out of Vatican II on the church called Gaudium et Spes, in which the church was defined as the soul and leaven of the society. Base Christian communities were started by pastoral agents, which could be priests or nuns, deacons, but very quickly the leadership was given over to the people who were trained, the lay people who were leading the movement. So the person who's narrating is a pastoral agent. And I thought I would just give you this little quote from the bishops about what happened in the Base Christian community, that there was a greater level of personal interaction, an acceptance of God's word, a re-examination of one's life, and reflection on reality in the light of the gospel. So the reality they were reflecting on was not only their personal reality, but also their communal and social reality. And then the goal was not just to reflect on it, but to reflect on it and act together collectively, and then to come back and reflect and to come back and act together collectively. So thank you. I hope this is helpful as you read the book.